Welcome to ABC's simple guide to measuring and installing our superb cafe blinds.
Here are the fast and easy steps you'll need to take.
First, here are the tools you'll need for the installation of your ABC blinds.
To begin with, you need to take accurate inside measurements as shown here.
Fill out all the measurements on the appropriate form for the blind you want.
The top beam needs to be level. This is very important. The side posts can be a different length if the site is sloping. It's important to allow for the slope on the paving or decking to enable any water to run off easily. If the top beam is not level, a simple calculation is required. Measure the length of the spirit level. Tilt the spirit level away from the top beam until the spirit level indicates that it is perfectly level. Measure the difference in drop between the end of the spirit level and the top beam. Then calculate the drop over the entire length of the top beam. For example, the entire top beam length is 2500 millimeters long and the spirit level is 1200 millimeters long. The difference in the drop is 20 millimeters over the length of the spirit level. This needs to be multiplied by the number of times the spirit level length, 1200 millimeters, fits into the overall width, 2500 millimeters. That is 2.1 times. 2.1 by 20 millimeters equals 42 millimeters. The drop needed over the entire length of the beam. If you are unsure of precisely what you need to do, simply send a photograph to us and we'll let you know exactly what the best options are for you. You can post us the photograph or scan it into your computer and email it to us at sales@abcblinds.com.au. All blind size reductions will be calculated by the factory based on your measurements, so it's important that they're accurate.
Now, here's how to install a cafe blind with 5-sided base rail with zips.
Step 1. Unpack the box. Please note that screws are not included. You will need to obtain screws to complete the installation. The precise requirements are explained later in this presentation. Leave the blind wrapped in the brown paper. This will help protect the fabric from being damaged. Step 2. Working from the inside of the patio or enclosure, fit the single and double pulley on the inside of the patio or enclosure.
When fitting up the pulleys, ensure that the dome in the centre of the pulley is facing outwards.
The distance from each side of the patio or enclosure depends on the width of the blind. If the blind is less than 2500 millimeters in width, the spacing needs to be between 250 to 300 millimeters from the edge of the blind. If the distance is between 2500 millimeters and 4000 millimeters, the spacing from the edge should be 400 millimeters. If the distance is greater than 4000 millimeters in width, the spacing should be 600 millimeters from the edge. Fit the breech staples to the outside of the patio or enclosure as shown here.
When fitting the bridge staples, ensure that they are centred to the pulley.
You will then need to fit the cleats shown here on the same side as your operation controls. It needs to be a minimum of 1600 millimeters up from the floor to comply with child safety regulations. Here are the details of the recommended screws to use. For timber, use an 8-gauge self-drilling into timber screw. These steel screws are zinc-coated. If you're drilling into steel, you'll need self-drilling zinc Phillip drive 8 to 18 gauge screws. Step 3. Before you begin to install the cord, you need to take a close look at the cording diagram.
You need to draw enough cord so it can just touch the ground.
Use the rope crimp to secure to the breech staple as shown here.
As per the diagram, loop the rope around the cleats, bring it up to the pulleys, and once again, loop it so it touches the floor.
Excess cord needs to be cut off before crimping the second breech staple.
Always remember, measure twice, cut once.
It's important to check the cord loop on the control side. It needs to be a minimum of 1600 millimeters up from the floor to comply with child safety regulations. Leave the ropes extended down to the floor, ready for the next step. Step 4. Place the blind in between the ropes. The blind should still be wrapped in brown paper. Remove the brown paper.
When raising the blind, support the blind from underneath so as to avoid scratching it.
Now secure the top track to the top beam of the patio or enclosure as shown here. The recommended screws to use are: for timber, use an 8-gauge self-drilling into timber screw. These steel screws are zinc coated. If you're drilling into steel, you'll need self-drilling zinc Phillip drive 8 to 18 gauge screws.
Always place one screw at each end of the track, ensuring all your fixings are from the inside of the patio.
Screw spacing along the top track should be approximately 300 millimeters. Step 5. Release the rope from the cleats. Then slowly lower the blind to the floor. Unzip the blind, making sure to take the zips to the top of the blind on each side.
Now we just feed the spline into the side tracks. When fixing the side tracks, make sure that the tracks are nice and level.
Now the zips can be fully zipped down. Step 6. Open the lock on the base rail. Place the lock inside the middle hole of the lockbox as shown. Mark the top of the lockbox to show where it sits against the side track. Take the black grommets out of the top and bottom holes of the lockbox. Then secure the lockbox to the post through the top and bottom holes in the black box. Now replace the grommets to the lockbox. The grommets prevent the lock from rattling. The recommended screws to use are: for timber, use an 8-gauge self-drilling into timber screw. These steel screws are zinc coated. If you're drilling into steel, you'll need self-drilling zinc Phillip drive 8 to 18 gauge screws. Please note that it's important that you make sure the zip is meshing properly. Move the zip up and down until it does so. Tension the zip by pulling down slightly and then secure the bottom of the zip with a screw through the side track, as shown here. Step 7. Cutting the skirts. First of all, make sure the pulleys are in the correct location before you begin to cut out the skirts. That is, make sure the spacing is correct. Also, make sure the cord is straight and vertical before cutting the skirt using scissors.
How to operate your 5-sided base rail blinds with zips and the tube and stirrup blinds.
Step 1. Undo the locks. Step 2. Undo the zips, making sure to pull the zips right to the top of the blind. Step 3. Remove the cord from the cleats. Step 4. Pull the cord down to roll up the blind. Step 5. Tie the cords around the cleats. Note that small blinds will require training to roll them up straight. If the blind is not rolling up and down straight, take the time to lower it and re-roll it up slowly and carefully.
How simple was that?